All right. Good morning. We're back again. This is part two. This is your developing measures in regards to your strategic plan. So I am going to share my screen again. Hopefully I don't get a tickle in my throat and we are good. So wait for it. Wait for it. Okay, it's started. Just put it up in slide mode presentation. And we are up and ready to go. So, a moment ago, I did a session for you on the elements of strategic planning. So, this session really focuses on the measurement side of that. So, once we get a good plan, we're happy with it, it takes us out 3 to 5 years or wherever our planning horizon is. Then we want to know, how do we know when we get there? What kind of measures do we put in place? And so, if you can envision, the strategic planning side is the art class, like the envision, our ambition, where we want to go in the future. And then you get to the measurement side, which is math class. So some of us are good at one thing, some of us are good at the other thing, but nonetheless, you need both of them. So here we go. Okay. So you saw this schematic in our other presentation. So this is really, now that we have our future fully defined and we're feeling really good about where we're going to go, we have to figure out a way to monitor. How do we know when we get there? So much like strategy, measurement has so much language and nomenclature that goes with it, and it can be quite confusing. So again, like I said with strategy, pick words that resonate with your organization and stick with it. Okay. And then we'll move forward. Don't get all jazzed up about, oh my God, is it a KPI or is it a health scorecard or what is it? Just know that you have good measures. Okay. So moving forward, I will, this is the standard definition of a KPI, but you can read the text. But what is a KPI? It's your key performance indicator related to your primary goals or objectives. How will we know when we get there? You might have multiple little measures within your organization, depending on how big you are, but your KPIs are your big guns. These ones tell us whether we're successful or not. And so again, quantifiable measure performance over time related to those very specific strategic objectives. So last time and I used Connex's credit union last time, you saw that they had this balanced strategy. So there it is again. But what I want to show you now is and talk a little bit about the balanced scorecard. You can't have a balanced scorecard unless you have a balanced strategy. So the balanced scorecard, which you've heard this term over and over again, comes from measuring then your balanced strategy. So for example, here is the member objectives for Connexus Credit Union. And you can see, it's hard to see, but you just need to appreciate, here's their measures and here's their targets. Therefore, this element here constitutes their balanced scorecard, and their balanced scorecard measures their balanced strategy. So that's where the concept or name of balanced scorecard comes from. So a few things about measures, and many of you have seen this before, but it is very important. So you've heard about measures should be SMART. So let's break that down. So when we talk about the S, that means very specific. So it's measuring that key strategic objective, and that will tell you whether you're achieving business success or not. And if you've got, say, 12 strategic objectives, you should have 12 measures, but you'll probably have more. But anyway, they're very specific to your strategic objective. They must be comparable and measurable. So one, it doesn't say it on the slide, but can you even get the data? So that is a big struggle for lots of organizations. They know they want to measure this, but how can we get the data? So can you in fact even measure it? And so then if you measure it, can you compare it over time? So here's one that's, and I'm going to use my parents as an example. A single blood pressure reading means nothing. Okay, so I go out to my parents' farm. I take their blood pressure and it's high or low or whatever, but it doesn't mean that's it. Things fluctuate over time. With your measures, you need a sequential way to measure over time to watch for improvement or no improvement or holding the line. So it has to be measurable and comparable with past measures. You'll hear comments like the baseline. Well, where are you starting from? If our strategy starts in 2021, what are we doing now and what's our measure? So then we have a baseline and we know we can improve over time. It must be attainable and realistic. So you might say, I'm going to start running, but you wouldn't set your goals on running a 4-minute mile, and that just quite frankly, how can I say, frustrates your staff. Create measures that are attainable. We can actually get there. A little bit of a stretch, but not too much of a stretch that you're going to actually demotivate your people. If you know you'll never get there, apathy just goes out. We'll never do that. So they give up. Like I said, you need a bit of a stretch, but not too much. So can you obtain it? Is it realistic? Which goes right into the next one. Pragmatic, realistic, achievable. And part of the realistic piece to me as well is, will you use these measures for decision making? Are they practical? I really like the word practical. I have found organizations I work with start measuring a swack of stuff, but they're not even using it for decision making. Well, why are you measuring that? Oh, I don't know. We just thought we should. Well, if you're not using it to change strategy or change how you do business, then don't measure it. So be practical, and then timely, which I've already kind of spoke to. You need a sequential time schedule, if I could say it that way, of measuring. So are you going to measure quarterly? Are you going to measure annually? Are you going to measure monthly? So what is your time frame that you're going to measure so you can do those comparatives? You will also find with measures, some of them can only be measured annually, and some can be measured monthly, like profits or customers served and things like that. So some things to think about. Okay, so when we're thinking, how do we develop our measures? There's several steps, and I'll try and demonstrate this very much like strategy. We got to break it down now. So first of all, as we talked about, you'll have those strategic objectives, those 12, 9, whatever they are that you want to achieve in 3 to 5 years. So make sure you know those strategic objectives. State your objectives in directional terms, and I'm a bit of a stickler on this, but why that is, if you say use increase, decrease, strengthen, that means that will move over time. If we say strengthen the customer experience in the next 3 years, then you'll know how many customers are satisfied with the experience. Now you'll have a baseline, and then you can measure it again next year, and the next year to see, are we in fact enhancing our customer experience or strengthening it? Okay, if you just say, do a customer survey, that's tactical. That's not a strategic objective. So again, I like your strategic objectives in vector terms, if I could say it that way, so you can measure it. So we've got our objectives. We're going to describe in a narrative. How will we know when we get there? We don't even have a measure yet, but describe what you want to see, and that will help you determine what measures might be needed. Okay, so you're describing the objective, describing what results will look like in a narrative term. Then you can start thinking about what might be the best measure to monitor that. And then you're going to establish your baseline and targets over time. All right, so those are the fundamental steps. I'll break that down for you. Again, you saw this slide in strategy, but I'm bringing it back. So here's our 3 to 4 or 5 priority themes, and then we have those very special or strategic objectives that will drive changes over the next 3 to 5 years. Again, notice how they are using vector words at the beginning. Notice here when you get down to initiatives, you recruit staff, develop programs, create projects. That language is more used for your tactics or your strategies. So again, as I'm trying to point out, use that language. Okay, hope this is making sense. So back to Connexus, and it's hard to see, but you can see improve employee experience, improve economic well-being of Saskatchewan, build member relationships, increase financial health. So they've tried to, where it makes sense to them, use that vector language. Now watch them break it down, and this slide comes from actually working with them. So let's take, you can see improve economic well-being, build member relationships, and you can see, what is it, increase financial membership. So now they're describing this objective. What does this even mean for us? Like what, and why is that important? This is important because what if your leadership changes over the next 3 to 5 years? And I've seen this happen even when I was working in healthcare. Our senior leaders would rotate in and out, and everybody had a different opinion of what this meant. So you need to document, what does this even mean? How will we know we get there? So there's describe the objective. Now we're going to describe the intended results. What would that look like if we get there? And this is a great exercise that you can do with the board as well. What does success look like for them? And as the leader, the CEO, then you've got a better sense, this is what they're interested in. Okay, or even for yourself, what does success even look like? Okay, then they begin to brainstorm some of the initiatives. They start talking about some of the tactical things, but most importantly, after this kind of cascade of discussion, they're starting to pick out their core measures. Here's what we could possibly measure. And there they are back up here in terms of the balance or their measures for this segment. Okay, I hope this is making sense. So you just don't jump to measures. You have to really think it through to get the best measures for your business. And this is a great dialogue with leaders, staff, and board. Okay, there it is. You saw that slide again, just showing now we've had our narrative and we were able to build our balance score measures. Okay, this is another one. You saw this in the strategy presentation. And this is the city of Regina, and this is their strategy, their balance strategy. And there's a clip of the measures that support these 3 objectives, the measures that support those 2, the measures that support those 4, so on and so forth. And there's their targets, okay? And so you're just seeing their 2021 targets. They will have subsequent targets over time, but this slide just shows you for a year at a glance. So again, balance strategy, balance scorecard, measures. They too went through that cascade to figure out this piece. Okay, so there's a lot of behind the scenes thinking, and so that's why I wanted to demonstrate or show that to you. All right, here's an interesting concept, and like I said, measurement can get a little confusing. There's a lot of pieces to it. Well, just like strategy, quite frankly, but we're in math class. Okay, so you have to understand the concept of outcome. Some of you probably already have this understanding, but I'm going to walk you through anyway. So some of you may have heard about the logic model. So what is the logic model? So any organization, any business has these components. So let me walk you through. When you're looking at the inputs, if I was to take your business and say, what are all the ingredients or inputs you need to run your business? Okay, well, we need money, investment, we need staff, you might need volunteers, we need equipment and supplies, there will be regulations, there will be laws, we need buildings, we need assets. So I almost think of it like a stew pot. Dump all that stuff in and you build your business. Okay, they're inputs. That's the stuff we need to run a successful business. Then we have activities. With our stuff, what do we do to serve the customer? So you might do training, you might do education, you might do manufacturing, you might do service delivery, you do all sorts of things. So those are just activities. From your inputs and doing your activities, then we have what we call our outputs. And they differ from outcomes. Outputs are simply how many served, how much this, how much that. So we might have taught so many classes. We might have sold so many variations of product. We might have provided so many hours of service to our clients or customers, so many participants served or customers served. So again, it's just the output. Outcome takes it one step further. And if I could say outcomes in my brain are, so what? So what if they bought our service? So what if they achieved this? Did it make a difference for them? And that's the outcome. I'm going to explain it more in a healthcare context first, and then I'm going to take it back to private industry. So I grew up in healthcare, and you may not know I'm a nurse by trade, but when I'm looking at healthcare, we do MRIs, we do surgeries, we do a whole swack of stuff. And we can measure how many surgeries did we do, how many MRIs did we do, how many diagnostic lab tests did we do. So we got a lot of output measures, but we don't always have good outcome measures. So what? Just because we did 1,000 hip and knee surgeries, does that mean those people are walking better, have better quality of life? We don't know unless we measure outcomes. And so that's the difference. You sometimes you have to measure output because you can't get the outcome, but outcome is also important. And again, only you will know what are the outcomes of our business or industry. So I'll take it one step further. There are three kind of levels, if I could say it that way, of outcomes. So level one outcome might be that we've changed knowledge, understanding, awareness, skill level. All right. So we've done education, or we've done a program, or we've done a service, and people have a knowledge change, an understanding change, an appreciation change. There's a shift there. First level. We have second level, behavior change, because they know differently, or they appreciated the service, or they had a good experience. They're going to come back. Here's a behavioral change. So customer retention, or customer engagement, or however you want to call it, is a behavior shift. That's important. Okay. And then lastly, if their behavior changes, we have long-term or bigger things happening for us. If we have more customers coming back, and we have customer loyalty and retention, then the bigger thing is our profits go up overall. We might have a better market share, a variety of things. Okay, so those are the outcomes. So you can measure earlier on different things. You can measure products sold. You can measure customer experience and appreciation, customers returning. This is cool. And then greater profit share. So that's it kind of explained in the private industry world. I'm going to give you an example. Since we're all women, many of you can relate to this next example. All right. And actually, my daughter's expecting any day now. So let's think of prenatal classes. Many of you may have gone to prenatal classes. All right. The first level outcome, let me back up. If I was teaching the prenatal classes, the output would be how many women came to my class and completed it to the end. I could say my class had 20 people and 18 finished. And then I'm going to say that's the output. And then I'm going to say, so what? And so the so what is, out of those 18 women and hubbies, couples, let's go couples, how many changed their knowledge and skills? So our hope would be expectant mothers have greater knowledge on how to care for their babies once they're born, not even just the mother, the husband and the mom. So have we changed their knowledge? Do they know? And so how would we demonstrate or even measure that? You might say, well, before they left on the last class, we quizzed them. They demonstrated to us they knew what to do. Okay. Now, the second level, just because they know better, did they actually behave differently? So the key is here, when they go home, can they actually do those skills that they learned? And so how will we know this? Well, the public health nurse is going to show up in 3 days and be there and say, how are you doing with breastfeeding? How are you doing with the diaper changes? How's feeding going? Any questions. So she will observe, is the mom looking after the baby? So that's the attitude, behavior change. And then, of course, if we get 1 and 2, we're hoping the long-term change is that moms have a better understanding of looking after. So then babies will be healthier. We'll have better, healthier babies achieving their milestones down the road. So I hope this makes sense. So let me do it in more of a private industry kind of context. Let's say we want our staff to be much better at customer service. So we've done some customer service training. The short term, you could measure. We did 10 classes, woohoo, for our staff, but that's still, I'm going to ask, so what? So what do you want to know? Do our staff understand and have the skills and capability to provide exceptional customer experience? And how will we know? Well, we have to go to the next level. Are we observing staff providing appropriate customer relations behaviors and that experience with staff, or with the customers, I should say? So are they behaving the way you want to when they engage with your customers? And lastly, if that does happen, then our ultimate would be our customer relationship and loyalty is enhanced. They come back, they use our services more, they buy our products more, so on and so forth. So I hope that makes sense. So much of the time you are measuring what I would call outputs because you can't get outcomes. But in your narrative, you should think about, what is it we really want here, and what is the outcome? Could we even measure that? So again, just trying to differentiate for you the difference between output, if I could say it that way, and outcome. All right. Some other components of measurement, and again, this is for appreciation, so I'm trying to just give you the overview. There's lots of bits and pieces to all of this. Okay, so performance measurement have dimensions. You might measure behavior, which we talked about. You might measure quality, timeliness, price, competence, satisfaction. So there's lots of dimensions. So what are we trying to measure? When we're measuring things, when you're measuring staff, you might be measuring competence. When you're measuring customers, you might be measuring satisfaction. When you're measuring a process, it might be, how efficient is our process? Can we get the product to the customer on time? So say you're doing service delivery and you had to because of COVID. What is your turnaround time? For a customer, if they're waiting for some food and they're waiting an hour, that's not appropriate. So we know that that wasn't efficient to get that out. So again, you've got different components. Is your measure direct or indirect? I'll break that down for you. Okay, we've already talked about, is it an outcome measure? And if so, is it intermediate or long-term? Or is it an output, process, or input measure? And are they leading and lagging? I'll break these down because you're going, holy crap, I don't know what any of that means. So wait for it. Okay, so I said back here, is it direct or indirect? Let's look at direct measures. If our strategic objective was improve service delivery, and then we wrote our narrative about it, so that's what it means. It means services are delivered on time. That's our qualifier. Then we can measure directly the percentage of service delivered on time as per our standard. If your standard is to get it out, remember Domino's getting it out. I can't remember what their thing was. If they didn't deliver the pizza within 30 minutes, you got one free. That was their service standard. So they could actually measure how often are we meeting standard. All right. Or another example is, say you want to improve organizational alignment. We want better integration in our planning activities with our business lines and so on and so forth. So again, there's the narrative, and then they can measure percentage of department representatives, including in our planning activities. So it's kind of a direct component there. Indirect means we can't quite get the measure directly related to what we're talking about, but we can do a hypothesis. We can say, if this, then that kind of thing. So let's break this down. There's two types here, correlation and contributing. And I'll break it down. You'll see it in the next slide. What I mean by correlation, let's say we want to improve safety. And that's our objective, improve safety in our organization. The narrative is we have a safer work environment. The indirect measure is we can monitor incidents of accidents. So there's our logic. You know, we don't actually have a measure that measures safety, but we can measure, excuse me, the number of incidents or accidents that we have. So therefore, that's an indirect measure, but we know it's correlated to our result. Or we want to improve our brand image. So our company image improves is our intended result. The indirect measure might be the number of unsolicited requests for our services. And there's the logic. So we're going to make a hypothesis. When we get more requests for our business or services, we're going to hypothesize the correlation that our company reputation has improved. So it's not direct, but we're gonna make an assumption here because we can't get a direct measure unless we went out and used a company to assess brand image and did focus groups or something like that. Okay, so correlation. There's a correlation to our intended result, or it can be contributing. And so again, if we go back to our improved safety, we want a safer work environment. There's our objective. There's our intended result. We can say percentage of employees who have completed safety training. Now that's an output measure, but they say we can't get any other measures. So you're going to make the hypothesis. If we train more people, there's a contribution to our end result, which is a safer workplace. All right. So you might measure both. You saw on the other slide, there was a correlation one. We're going to measure number of incidents and amount of training, and those are the two measures for that objective. Okay, so you can do a variety of things. Or we want to enhance our partnering as an organization. So our intended results is interface with partners are more effective. So we're going to say more frequent visits by senior leaderships or senior staff with our liaisons will improve our partnership effectiveness, for lack of better words. So again, it's not a direct measure, but we're going to make an assumption if we actually go out and meet with them more and have more dialogue and build relationships, that our partnerships will be more effective. So again, you're probably recognizing these are not direct measures, but it's the only thing we can measure. So again, as you set up your measures, you're thinking, if we can't measure it directly, what can we measure that will give us a good indication that we might be getting there? Alrighty. So that just says showing some logic. You can measure inputs and processes and outputs, and we call those lead because they're kind of leading up to the outcome. Or you can measure strategic outcomes, which are called lag. And I'm not going to get into that. Just you might hear terms of leading and lag. Maybe I'll frame it this way. Your leading measures are your progress reports. We trained this many people. We did this much service. We served this many customers. They're all, to me, in kind of progress upfront measures. And you do those because you want to know how much are we doing. If we said we wanted to do so many classes by 2022 or do so many service deliveries by this time, you can monitor that, and that gives you a measure. If you want to know customer experience, that's a harder one. That's an outcome, so it's harder to get at. Okay, a few more things again. So some criteria. First thing I'm going to say, it's like a few good measures are way better than a swack of lousy measures. So when I work with my clients and they're just starting to get into performance measurement, I say, pick some really good ones, and you may not even have one for every objective, but measure, because you can get overwhelmed with this. So what measures would best show you as a leadership team or as a board or a staff that we are making the mark? Pick the best ones. Even if you have a slate of 5 to begin with, start there. So again, use direct measures with the strongest correlation, or indirect, if you need to. So use direct or those with the strongest correlation and contribution to whatever you want to achieve. Pick the ones you can control. There's a lot of measures you can say, this would be a great measure, but we have no control over it, and it's influenced by so many other things. So that's not a good one for us. Let's pick ones we have control over and we can actually measure. Use those that really are closer to a desired behavior and outcome wherever possible. Start with where you're at. Again, understand your baseline, understand what you want to. And I didn't talk about comparatives, but this is our baseline. You have competitors. What are they measuring? And if you want to compete with them, what are their benchmarks? So I didn't even get into benchmarks and comparatives, but again, here's our baseline. We're going to say our competitor, their time of delivering services is here. This is where we want to go. So you can use a benchmark to set your targets because you want to compete. So there's those type of things. Can you get the data? That's a big one. And, so can we actually measure it? Have we built a little system in place that we can actually monitor and know that we're getting there? And percentages are better than numbers. And what do I mean by that? A number is a picture in time. If you said a percentage, you would say we had a percentage of 5% improvement over last year. So that's when you're starting to compare year over year. You might say a number is we had 1,000 deliveries to customers. Okay, that's nice. But if you said we had 1,000 deliveries to our customer, and then in the next year you said we had 1,000 and I don't know, I'm just picking numbers out of the blue, 1,100, what percentage? That's a 10% percentage increase. So that is meaningful. That's why percentages are better. So bringing it home, I'm 1 minute over here. Once you get into measurement, you might create a data profile. And so I don't want to get into all this. This is too much detail, but just like your strategy, who's monitoring, who's in charge of the measure? Maybe I'll just say it like that. Measures just don't happen. You have to sign a responsibility. So who in your organization is actually measuring that data and in charge of it to make sure that we actually get a measure? So there's a lot of pieces going on here now. And lastly, you've seen this, but there's reporting legends. So again, what was the target and are we on target? You've seen these, are we not on target? We're a little bit behind where we wanted to be, or we're totally out to lunch here. We're not achieving any. We're way behind where we wanted to be at this point in time. So again, lots of organizations use some kind of component to report on their measures. Lastly, I'll just show you, this is a bogus, just right on a stock image right off the internet, but it just, what I do like about it, it shows the balance, it shows the objective, the target, and the current, and it shows how they're using that kind of schematic to say we're below target, we're on track, or we're questionable. So again, when you start to get into reporting, that's where it's at. So very quick, I always like to show you a little example. Work Prep Center is a client of mine. Again, we did the retreat. There's the strategic priorities. There they describe the intended results. That resulted in a scorecard, which resulted in an operational plan, which resulted in a balanced scorecard. And you can see there's the strategic objective, there's their measures, and they're starting to set up their targets over 3 years. Okay, so just showing you a bit of a cascade. All right, guys, I went over 3 minutes. Oops. So now you're totally boggled. But anyway, we'll talk more about this in the Q&A that we have coming up. So again, my pleasure. I can't wait to meet you, and I'm going to sign off now. Thanks, guys.